My wife Jessie and I had just finished a passionate love scene, and she was lying with her head on my chest. We'd been having pretty good sex for the past few weeks. "I've met someone else," she said. "So you want a divorce?" was my immediate response as I got out of bed. She sat there, her beautiful breasts exposed. "I was hoping we could work this out differently. Talk to me, Jack." I was busy stuffing a week's worth of clothes into a suitcase and grabbing the toiletries I took with me on business trips and vacations. "I'll call my lawyer in the morning, and I advise you to do the same. Just forget about it, Jack. Forget I said anything, and come back to bed." "No, Jessie. After living with you for the last 2 years, you're throwing that in my face. No way, damn it." And I left. 2 years ago, Jessie was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She was only in her early 20s. A hysterectomy robbed her of her ability to have children, chemotherapy robbed her of her hair, and hormonal imbalances turned her into a bitch. 6 months ago, things started to get back to normal, and the irrational outbursts subsided. But during the first year, there was a period when I thought I was losing my mind and Jessie was losing hers. The psychologist I was seeing helped, and I had high hopes for good medication, but he pointed out that all of Jessie's dreams had been shattered and that nothing in her world was safe. Jessie constantly tested me to see if she could rely on me. This was partly due to hormones. The surgery had disrupted her balance, and it would take time for the doctors to find the right hormone therapy. Of course, I could have left her, but then the whole world would have despised me. I didn't need that at all, but it was the truth. After settling into a cheap hotel, I wrote to my boss and manager that I needed a few days off. I felt guilty because my boss had been very lenient with me while I was dealing with Jessie's cancer. It seemed like every 15 minutes that night and the next day, a different Jessie was texting me. In several messages, she said she was just testing me to see if I was still attached to her because she couldn't have children. A few seconds later, she wanted to know why I was so against an open marriage. And in the middle of all this crap were her apologies. The thought ran through my head. How could I believe she had really given up on the idea of an open marriage, or would she just sleep with this guy behind my back? Our sex life had been great lately, maybe because she was fantasizing about the guy she met. That Monday, I found a lawyer, canceled our joint credit cards, and opened a separate bank account. When I met with the lawyer, there were no surprises. Jessie earned more than I did, and we had few assets. We lived in an apartment while she was battling cancer. That evening, I sent Jessie a text message with my lawyer's name and number and told her what I had done with the credit cards. Her response shocked me. "Is the poor little boy happy with what he's done today? Is your little male ego satisfied? Stop this nonsense. Come home, I forgave you." Didn't she realize that her response would have the opposite effect and not make me come home? I typed out a dozen responses, but in the end I wrote, "At least now I'll have a chance to find someone who can give me children." But I couldn't be that cruel, so I deleted it and wrote instead, "After everything we've been through, after I tried so hard to show you how much I love you, it was so hurtful to read those words. I'm not going to put up with this. I'm blocking you. Find a lawyer, and we'll communicate through him." The next day, my administrator called me. She had gone to the bathroom, and when she came back, she found Jessie in my office in a very upset state. My administrator, Cheryl, had worked for me for at least 5 years. She was old enough to be my mother. Her favorite phrase was, "I love you like my son, and I won't hesitate to slap you when you do something stupid, so don't do anything stupid." Cheryl asked me to explain what was going on. She already knew about my cancer problems with Jessie, so I only had to tell her about the last 48 hours. Actually, I was glad to get it off my chest, and I expected her to scold me. Instead, she said, "I would have done the same thing, Jack, but maybe this is one of those tests your psychologist talks about. In any case, you should go see him again. I'll talk to Jessie. She can't stay in your office overnight, and the only option is to call the police for trespassing if she doesn't leave on her own." Cheryl called me back an hour later. I convinced her to leave, Jack. That's good news. But the whole time we were talking, it felt like I was talking to three different people. Even her mannerisms changed. One, Jessie, was deeply remorseful, saying it was just a random thought and she wanted to know your opinion. She didn't think it through and understands your reaction. You've been her rock for the last 2 years, and she needed you. Then her expression changed, and she started calling you a Neanderthal and asking what was wrong with having sex with other people if we were faithful to each other. She was spouting some psychological nonsense from Cosmo that didn't make any sense and was generally incoherent. She mentioned the male ego a lot. In the end, she said, "I don't need his crap. I can have a much better sex life without him," and ran out of your office. You should contact her doctor. I called her doctor, but got his answering machine. An hour later, he called back. I tried to describe Jessie's behavior as accurately as possible, but I felt like he didn't understand what I was talking about. Finally, he said he would try to get her to come in for an appointment. I asked him to keep me informed, but he said that was against medical confidentiality laws. I was left worried about the woman I loved and feeling like I'd had enough, but I unblocked Jessie and asked her to see a doctor. She replied that she was fine. 2 days later, Jessie sent me a text message saying she had hired a lawyer and moved out of the apartment. It was too small for her and held too many bad memories for me to go back. My lawyer confirmed that he had spoken to Jessie's lawyer and that the case should move fairly quickly. I didn't know how to feel about that. A month later, Jessie unexpectedly demanded counseling. My lawyer advised me to smile and at least pretend to participate. 3 weeks later, Jessie and I were sitting in the psychologist's office. It was the first time I had seen her since the night she told me she had met someone. Jessie dominated the first session. When the psychologist asked her what she hoped to get out of counseling, Jessie delivered what sounded like a rehearsed speech about how she had spoken a random thought out loud and how sorry she was that she had hurt me. Then she moved on to a detailed discussion of her cancer, her loss of the ability to have children, and how I had been a rock for her even when she was cruel to me. There were a lot of tears, and I found myself holding her hand, as I had done so many times during her treatment. The counselor noticed that I was holding her hand and smiled. I wanted to say, "Wait, lady, you haven't come far enough yet." The next week, a completely different Jessie showed up. She was spouting her New Age nonsense, calling me a caveman who was trying to dominate his woman and not let her breathe. It was a little different from her previous Cosmo-inspired ramblings and went on longer. The counselor started agreeing with her, especially when Jessie said she had almost died and realized she had missed out on so much in life. The counselor turned to me and asked what I thought. "Let me start by saying that your impartiality left this room about 15 minutes ago. I've never been close to death, so I can't say I understand how Jessie feels. But still, why fight for the marriage? Let's split up and she can try everything she may have missed out on in life. I've never tried to dominate her. She wants to experience something new, and I'm opening the door for her." "Why is divorce the solution for you, Jack?" asked the counselor. "Jessie has her own idea of the life she wants to live, and so do I. Those ideas don't match." "But you're not willing to compromise?" "In some ways I'm not. In others I am. I remained faithful and loving to Jessie even when it became clear that she couldn't give me the children I always wanted." Jessie ran out of the counselor's office when she heard that. "That was inappropriate, Jack. You have no idea what you're talking about. I lived in hell for 2 years supporting Jessie, being a loving husband, until her hormonal imbalance drove her into a corner. I spent many hours with my own counselor trying to keep my sanity. He told me that Jessie was testing me to see if she could really rely on me. He kept saying, 1 day at a time. You know how many days there are in 2 years, damn it. And after all that, I get rewarded with her request to open up our marriage. I'm sorry if you think that was inappropriate, but it's time for me to get off the Jessie train." I stood up and walked out of her office. Shortly after Jessie moved into my office, a young woman began spending a lot of time near my office, never missing an opportunity to strike up a conversation with me. I think she had a camera in my office because she always knew when I was going to get coffee or to the cafeteria for lunch. She would ask if she could sit with me during lunch. Her name was Jill, and she was very shy, but our conversations were pleasant. It was a nice break from Jesse's crazy behavior. After our third lunch, I asked Cheryl about her. "Jack, she just started showing up at your office one day, maybe a week after Jesse was in your office. She works in accounting and recently got divorced. I assume she told me that, so I would pass it on to you. Jill also knows you're getting divorced, which isn't too surprising. Rumors spread very quickly here, but what's surprising is that she knows that the reason for the divorce is Jesse's request to open up your marriage. As far as I know, you and I are the only ones in the building who know about this. I needed to talk to Jill, preferably not at the office, so I invited her to dinner after work. From the moment we left the building until we ordered, I thought Jill was going to run away like a scared deer. Jill, why are you so nervous? I'm not nervous, Jack. Her hand was shaking as she tried to take a sip of water. I took her hands in mine. Please, Jill, tell me what's scaring you so much. Are you afraid someone will see us together? You're the first man I've gone to dinner with or anywhere else since my divorce. I don't think that's the whole answer. We've had dinner together dozens of times. It's not that different. My husband, or ex-husband Mark, cheated on me. I think he was cheating on me even before we got married. I hired a private investigator to gather evidence, but it didn't really help. One of the things he did was install an app on my ex's phone so that the detective and I would get copies of all his text messages. I don't know why, but I didn't delete the app after we broke up. I saw text messages between him and your wife, whom he was trying to seduce. They work in the same building but for different companies. I have to say, there was a lot of his classic sweet talk, telling her how beautiful she was, how the dress she wore that day accentuated her figure, how her perfume smelled. I could go on, but the point is, it was constant. Jesse told him that after everything you did for her during her cancer treatment, she couldn't cheat on you. He suggested she try to convince you to open up the marriage. When that backfired, she told my ex that he ruined her life and that you wanted a divorce. He gave her a week to cool off and then started sweet-talking her again. He also told Jesse that since she was getting a divorce, she was free to enjoy everything life had to offer. Yesterday, Jesse told him that you were the only reason she survived cancer and the only reason she could enjoy life, and that if she wasn't with you, in your arms, she didn't want to enjoy life without your love. I'm sorry, Jack. At first, when I realized that the same man who destroyed my marriage was destroying yours, I thought maybe we could get closer. I was afraid to tell you what I knew. You're a good guy, and I'm lonely. I was nervous today because I knew I had to do the right thing, but part of me didn't want to, and I hoped you wouldn't hate me. Jill talked throughout dinner, often holding back tears, and still looked as if she was about to run away. Thank you, Jill. I don't hate you. In fact, I admire your courage. I don't think I'm as great a guy as you describe me, but thank you for your honesty. I have another session with Jesse tomorrow night. Every week he's like a different person. I don't see any reason why Jesse and I should get back together. She doesn't act like a woman who would text your husband. I hear the words coming out of her mouth and wonder who this woman is. At our last session, she suggested we open up our marriage and asked why I was so stubborn about it. You're a beautiful woman, Jill, but even if Jesse and I get divorced, I think it will be a long time before I can get serious with another woman. Jesse hurt me deeply. But I'd like to continue having dinner with you if you don't mind. It's a nice distraction from my problems with Jesse. I understand your pain, Jack, and I'm grateful that you don't hate me. That evening, she smiled for the first time. It was time for our third session, and I couldn't decide whether to reveal what I knew about Mark. At the same time, I was comforted by the fact that even when we were getting divorced, she never showed any intention of dating Mark. I was sitting in the parking lot thinking about all this when an expensive Porsche pulled up to the building. Jessie got out of the passenger seat. Her skirt was short. Jessie smiled at me as she stood up. I wasn't sure, but it looked like the top of her dress was see-through. She said something to the driver whom I couldn't see, and he drove away. Jessie swayed her hips as she entered the building, and with every step, I could see a good inch of her buttocks. I thought about texting Jill and asking what kind of car her husband drove. It was time to get off the Jessie train. I headed into the building. The counselor stared at Jessie with her mouth open. Jessie's blouse was see-through, and she wasn't wearing a bra, her breasts clearly visible. On top of that, most of the buttons down to her belly button were undone. "Well, Jessie, you're definitely making a statement with your outfit, so you can begin." "Thanks. Last weekend I had an epiphany and realized why I even went to a consultant. As Jack pointed out in our last session, I can't have children, so why do I need a husband? I can support myself and I make more money than Jack. Many men find me attractive, and with my current style of dress, I have to fight them off. Plus, I can drive expensive cars like the Porsche that gave me a ride today. I can enjoy everything life has to offer." Jessie's crazy train was racing down the tracks. The counselor said, "Jessie, please don't dress like that anymore. I can see a lot of parts of your body that I don't want to see." Jessie replied by unbuttoning her blouse, several buttons flying across the room, and Jessie completely exposed her breasts. The consultant turned to me. I wondered what she wanted from me. I liked Jessie's breasts, and I had a hard time resisting pinching them the way she liked. Instead, I said, "This all started because Jessie wanted to do something I didn't agree with, and my position hasn't changed. If Jessie wants to enjoy everything life has to offer, I won't stand in her way. But as someone said to me yesterday, can you really enjoy everything life has to offer without love?" Jessie was shocked when I started to leave. She rushed over to me, pushed me back into my chair, and collapsed, resting her head on my lap. The counselor got up for some reason and turned away, and I'm sure Jessie gave her a good look at what was under her skirt. "Jack, I'm sorry. I ruined everything. I was hoping you'd be jealous tonight. My friend Grace gave me a ride in her husband's car. There was a guy there who convinced me to ask you about opening up our marriage, and I wasn't prepared for your answer. I really wasn't interested in that sleazy bastard, and on top of that, some woman started texting me and telling me what a jerk he was. She knew all his lines and repeated his nonsense to me, like how beautiful I was and how good I smelled. Like I said, I wasn't interested in this guy, but he wouldn't leave me alone. I was so lost without you, but my anonymous friend helped me resist his nonsense." "Jack, I don't want to enjoy everything life has to offer without your love. I don't want a life without your love. I would never have survived cancer without your love at the end." "I'm sorry for my stupidity. I promise it will never happen again, and I promise I will never take your love for granted again." Jessie continued to cry on my lap. The counselor looked at me and shrugged. Then Jessie pulled me in for a kiss. "Let me remind you that before all this shit, Jessie and I had a pretty good sex life. Maybe she fantasized about Mark, but it was fine, and I didn't care who she fantasized about. By that point, we hadn't had sex in 3 months. Ah, Jack and Jessie, let's call it a day and you can enjoy sex after your fight somewhere other than my carpet." As we leave the building, Jessie throws what's left of her blouse into the air. "Jack, what if I told you that I want to enjoy life wearing as little clothing as possible? Will I enjoy life with your love?" "Except for a few occasions, like when we're at my parents' house. You'll have my love, of course." We quickly ran across the parking lot, but as soon as we entered the apartment, we started fooling around again. By the time we finished, it was too late to go to work the next day. We woke up just long enough to call our bosses, and within seconds, we were back asleep. 2 weeks later, I invited Jill to a restaurant to introduce her to my wife. Jessie didn't know who Jill was and seemed confused as to why I had invited another woman to dinner with us. After we ordered, I said, "Jessie, I want you to meet Mark's ex-wife. She's also your anonymous friend." Both women were shocked. Jessie didn't know that I knew she was her anonymous friend. Both women burst into tears and hugged each other. Jessie couldn't stop thanking me for saving her.